All right, good afternoon. Apologies for the delay. I will start off with a statement on the situation in Ukraine. The Secretary General strongly condemns today's missile attack by the Russian Federation, hitting residential and civilian infrastructure across Ukraine, including in the cities of Kyiv, Kryvyi Rih, Dnipro and Pokrovsk. The strike reportedly killed dozens of civilians, including children, and injured over 150 more. The incidents in which missiles hit the Okhmatdyt National Children's Specialized Hospital in Kyiv, which is the largest pediatric facility in Ukraine, and another medical facility in Kyiv, are particularly shocking. Directing attacks against civilian and civilian objects is prohibited by international humanitarian law, and any such attacks are unacceptable and must end immediately. The Secretary General extends his deepest condolences to the families of all victims and wishes a speedy recovery to those injured. Just a few more details about the situation on the ground. Our humanitarian affairs colleagues tell us that the children's hospital in the center of Kyiv was severely damaged as children were actually receiving treatment. Our humanitarian colleagues say that rescue workers, hospital staff, and volunteers are currently clearing rubble and searching for people trapped under that rubble. Our health partners are helping to move patients to other facilities, providing psychosocial support and assisting with other urgent needs. They're also in contact with hospitals to coordinate any additional support that may be required. Humanitarian workers are on site at the hospitals to provide water and psychosocial support, among other assistance. The city of Kyiv experienced several attacks which impacted several residential areas, and we also have a statement on this attack from the resident humanitarian coordinator in Ukraine, Denise Brown, as well as from UNICEF. Meanwhile, the Secretary General returned back to New York yesterday. He's in the office today. As you know, he finished up his trip to Central Asia over the weekend. In Turkmenistan, which was his last stop before heading home, he met with Serdar Berdimuhamedov, the president of Turkmenistan. They discussed cooperation between the United Nations and Turkmenistan and regional developments across Central Asia. The Secretary General thanked the president for providing the UN country team in Turkmenistan with a new building. In a press encounter following his meeting, the Secretary General said Turkmenistan is playing a very important role in international relations and commended Turkmenistan's policy of neutrality. He also noted that Central Asia continues to face many obstacles to development, like water shortages, land degradation, natural hazards, and a lack of adequate connectivity. The more details are available online on the Secretary General's program. Turning to the situation in Gaza, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that people are being displaced from parts of Gaza City after Israeli authorities issued new evacuation orders yesterday and today. These areas have already been subject to blanket evacuation orders in October for all of northern Gaza. The affected neighborhoods are home to more than 60 shelters that have been schools, as well as 2 partially functional hospitals, 6 medical points, and 2 primary healthcare centers. Staff and patients have reportedly left hospitals in and around the areas that were designated for evacuation. Meanwhile, OCHA tells us that active hostilities, damaged roads, access limitations, and the lack of public order and safety continues to hamper movement along the main humanitarian cargo route from the Karim Shalom crossing to Khan Yunis and then on to Deir al-Balah. This has resulted in critical shortages of fuel and aid to sustain humanitarian operations. It is also increasing the risk that stranded supplies, especially food, will spoil in the very hot summer heat. Humanitarian partners said these shortages forced them to reduce food rations in central and southern Gaza last month and undermine their ability to keep bakeries and community kitchens up and running. Just 3 of the 18 bakeries that our humanitarian colleagues support in Gaza are still operational, all of them in Deir al-Balah. Meanwhile, lack of fuel has forced 9 bakeries that were working in partial capacity to completely cease their operations. And turning to Lebanon, ahead of the planned UN Security Council consultations on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 later this month, the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, arrived in Israel yesterday for a 3-day visit. Discussions with Israeli officials are expected to focus on the need to restore calm and give space for a diplomatic resolution that enables displaced civilians on both sides to return home, as well as to address the outstanding provisions under Security Council Resolution 1701. Since assuming office last month, the Special Coordinator has extensively engaged with the Lebanese leadership, key interlocutors, on ways to de-escalate tensions across the Blue Line. And some positive news from Yemen. The Office for the Secretary General Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, said that negotiations held in Oman over the weekend led to a significant breakthrough, where the Yemeni parties reached an understanding on releasing Mohammed Katan, a prominent politician who'd been held incommunicado by the Houthis since 2015. The Office of the Special Envoy said that his release was a contentious matter for years. The parties also agreed to a meeting to finalize the names of detainees to be let go and arrangements pertaining to the release of Mohammed Katan. In a statement, Mr. Grunberg called on the parties to agree on more release operations. He also repeated demands for the immediate and unconditional release of UN personnel and aid and civil society workers who've been arbitrarily detained in Sana'a and continue to be held incommunicado. And this morning, Bintou Keita, the head of the UN peacekeeping mission for the DRC, briefed the Security Council. She said the situation in the eastern part of the country has reached alarming levels of violence and civilian displacement, adding she's extremely concerned about the rapid expansion of the M23 armed group in North Kivu and the spillover into South Kivu, despite numerous operations conducted by the Congolese armed forces, which are regularly supported by UN peacekeepers. During their latest military offensive, Ms. Keita told council members the M23 and its backers triggered additional population displacement, worsening an already catastrophic humanitarian and human rights operation. Ms. Keita will speak to you at the Security Council stakeout a bit later on today, probably in about 45 minutes or so. And the head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, Leonardo Santos Shimao, was in Abuja, Nigeria yesterday, where he took part in the 65th Ordinary Session of the Economic Community of West African States, better known as ECOWAS. In his intervention, he commended the organization's continuous and sustained efforts to address the multiple challenges facing the sub-region, particularly the threat to unity and cohesion of ECOWAS and efforts to address terrorism. He also stressed the importance of peaceful elections and called for increased efforts to promote gender inclusiveness. As the sub-region faces complex challenges, Mr. Shimao reiterated our support to national and regional efforts to ensure peace and stability and enhance democracy and good governance. A couple of weather-related notes. In Bangladesh, ahead of the anticipated flooding across the country, $6.2 million was distributed by the Central Emergency Response Fund on July 4th to support the most vulnerable families. The funds will allow the Food and Agriculture Organization, UNICEF, the UN Population Fund, and the World Food Program to reach some 400,000 people in the country's north with cash transfers, water purification supplies, agricultural support, and information on gender-based violence. The UN resident coordinator in Bangladesh, Gwyn Lewis, said the anticipatory action can significantly reduce the impact of disaster on families and support faster recovery, adding that families are empowered to make their own decisions on how to best protect homes and livelihoods. And Hurricane Beryl, turning to Hurricane Beryl in Central America and the Caribbean, we continue to support authorities and our partners to respond to the impact that the hurricane had on the region. We've sent assessment teams to St. Vincent's and the Grenadines, Grenada, and Jamaica. The teams have identified clean water, shelter, food, and health services as the priority needs in the parts most impacted by the hurricane in 3 countries. Several of these island airstrips have suffered damage, and some islands can only be accessible by smaller boats. This is obviously hampering our logistics efforts. Our partners are setting up field hospitals in Kyriakou in Grenada, and our assessment team is setting up on-site operations. The team will also support registration of humanitarian agencies coming on the islands. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our teams and the WFP are on the ground in Union Island, where relief items will be distributed tomorrow. And the UN resident coordinator for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Simon Spriggett, is traveling by boat today to several islands in the St. Vincent's and the Grenadines, including Union, Kakwan, Bekia, and Mero. Also want to flag that the high-level political forum on sustainable development started today. Our Deputy Secretary General Mina Mohammed presided over the opening of the forum, which will go until Wednesday, 17th July, under the auspices of the Economic and Social Council. The theme will be reinforcing the 2030 agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises, the effective delivery of sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions. We'll be giving you updates throughout. And before the holiday weekend, we had a full payment from the third permanent member of the Security Council. Any guess who that is?
UK or France? China.
Yes, Deji. I mean, you've gone through all five, so yes, Deji, you win. So we thank Moscow for taking the number of fully paid up nations to 121. Deji, please. Since you let your friends name all the other four members.
Yeah, I was just waiting to get all of them. Okay, so first couple of updates. You mentioned that the release of officials in Yemen. How about the 11 UN staffer? We heard the news that a couple of days ago the Houthis are actually in talk with UNICEF. They said they would release some of the staffers. Do you have any update?
No one, as far as we know, have been released. And as you saw in his statement, Mr. Grunberg also appealed to the authorities in Sana'a to release all of those UN staffers, civil societies, and others who have been detained, some of them for a long time, completely incommunicado.
Houthi actually accused them of being members of American-Israeli spy network.
Well, we would like to have access to our people, right? That's the most important part, most important initial part. Nowhere in the world should people be held without charge.
My second question, the talk between Hamas and Israel is still ongoing, but today Hamas released a statement said Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, is placing obstacles in the negotiations, calling on mediators to intervene to put an end to his scheme. I think they are referring to what Prime Minister Netanyahu's 5 points of red lines that released on Sunday. Does the Secretary General worried that this round of talk could also end up in nowhere?
Look, I think we all have to be very realistic, but I think the most important thing, if we want these talks to be successful, is to avoid, at least for our part, on commenting on rumors, leaks, and what is being said publicly.
And
lastly?
Lastly, for me, what I don't understand is, obviously, Israel is in talk with Hamas, but in those 5 points, the five red lines, one of them is Israel's goal is not going to be changed, which is to eliminate Hamas. So Israel is in talk with the target that he's going to eliminate.
Deji, with all due respect, I would, this sounds like a great topic for an expert on the Middle East as opposed to a spokesman for the Secretary General. Edith Lederer.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups and a question. Can we get an update on fuel deliveries in Gaza, which seems to be coming even more dire?
Yeah, I mean, there's no good update. I can try to give you some numbers, but there's nothing positive to report.
And I'm sure this is not going to be an answer either, but it's already July and Martin Griffiths is gone. Are we going to be getting an announcement soon on his replacement?
We will get an announcement. I'm not going to give you a time frame, but I can tell you the process is very much underway.
And thirdly, is there going to be any kind of UN appeal to help the victims of Hurricane
Yes,
Beryl?
I believe something is being prepared. Abdelhamid, then Benno.
Thank you. On Saturday evening, there was a massacre in an UNRWA school. It's called Jaouni UNRWA school. 16 Palestinians were killed, 50 were wounded. UNRWA is calling for investigation. I haven't heard blunt, direct, strong language the way I heard it about Ukraine. Why there is no strong statement
I think if
about
you
that?
look back over the last 9 months of this tragic conflict, you will hear very strong language from the Secretary General. Mr. Lazzarini spoke out. The Secretary General fully shares his sentiments about what is going on. We need to see an end to this conflict. As we've said, we need an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We need to stop the fighting. We need to have full access to our humanitarian aid, and we need to see a release of the hostages.
Second question. The Israeli channel 12 disclosed a letter from the Shabak head, Mr. Bar. He said, we have 21,000 Palestinian prisoners, not 8,600 that was disclosed in March. And he said that's why the prisoners are so crowded, the treatment of the prisoners deteriorating. That's what he said. Do you have any comment?
I haven't seen the letter, but I can tell you that we have called for people who are being held in administrative detention to be released, and for all of these allegations of human rights violations to be investigated. Benno, then Benny.
Thank you, Steph. Sorry I was late for the briefing, so forgive me, but I think you didn't comment on the France elections and the outcome, did you?
I did not.
Can you?
I will comment on the result of the France-Portugal game over the weekend, but I have no comment on the legislative elections. And I mean, we've all seen the news with
But
the issue
you
of a
comment
government
normally
being
on
discussed.
elections in democracies, no?
We don't comment on every parliamentary election that takes place.
Okay, then let me ask this. I was asking you last week as well about that the Secretary General was talking against or like about the threat of right-wing policies and getting more and more foothold in Western democracies. Now, this was avoided in France. Does the SG think this might be a blueprint for other societies to like stick together to the far right?
Look, I think every country has its own specific ecosystem. The Secretary General's sentiments regarding extremist parties remains the same. Benno, then Bassam, and then we'll see how many more Bs we can call on.
I assume when you say Benno, you meant
Benny,
me.
sorry, Benny, Benno. Yeah, you know. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Thank you, Benno.
Before and after. Yeah.
I have two questions unrelated. One, the IDF says their operation today in Gaza City is concentrating, among other places, on an UNRWA facility that was overtaken by Hamas. Do you have any comment on that?
Listen, we've seen these reports before. A lot of our UN facilities flying the UN flag are shelters. Excuse me, are shelters. We have repeatedly asked for full information and investigation on the misuse of our premises by whichever party. Your second question.
My second question is, apparently there's an IOS investigation over financial mishandling of money by Francesca Albanese. Are we going to
No, there is. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding and on this. The fact that a case number is assigned does not mean an investigation has started. It's just basically when a complaint comes in to IOS, they assign it a number just to keep track, right, of things. But they have not opened an investigation, given that the authority over special rapporteurs rests with the Human Rights Council.
So does that mean that Albanese is cleared of all allegations?
I'm not going
if
to.
there's no investigation, I mean.
Let's try to untangle this plate of spaghetti here. There is the fact that they have not opened an investigation because there is the authority over Ms. Albanese is under the human rights, the Human Rights Council that appoints them. It's not the Secretary that appoints them. It's not the High Commissioner for Human Rights that appoints them. Is just that. It's not a statement on the allegations.
So if there are suspicions of financial mishandling of finances and all of that, where's that
through the people who appoint the special rapporteurs, the Human Rights Council.
Because from what I understand, she says that the UN paid her expenses for that trip.
The word the UN is a pretty big. The word the UN is a pretty wide word.
But is that the Human Rights Council?
It does not come through the Secretary General or the Secretary.
So nothing to do with the Secretary General.
I would address your questions in the direction of the Human Rights Council presidency.
Nothing to do with the
nothing to do with
UN
the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Thank you.
Madame.
Thank you. The Lancet, the medical journal. The Lancet, the medical journal, just published a letter from experts basically saying that the current number of casualties in Gaza is probably an underestimate, and they say it's not implausible to estimate up to 186,000 even more deaths from the conflict in Gaza. Has the Secretary General seen this letter, and what is his reaction to it?
He hasn't seen the letter. He's aware of the news report. We were not involved, as far as I know, into this study. I think it is not a stretch of the imagination that the numbers are probably undercounted, given the fact that the debris and rubble is yet to be cleared. But whatever number we're speaking about, it is tragic, overwhelming, and even hard to imagine.
So just a quick follow-up. So you're saying it's not hard to imagine, because what they also mention, it's not just the rubble, it's diseases,
of course,
and so...
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Nizar, and then we'll go to AFP.
Yeah, you said that the situation, the famine situation in Gaza, or the hunger situation, if you want to use famine there, is dire, and WFP said that. Today there were footage of settlers burning trucks at Karm Abu Salim.
Of what, sorry? Of?
At the Karm Abu Salim crossing. Do you condemn such action? And
I didn't hear the first. There was what at the sorry.
Trucks were being incinerated
Yeah.
by Karm Abu Salim crossing. And these footage were shown on televisions everywhere. I believe the United Nations should have seen this.
I mean, all of these are example of the continuing lawlessness and challenging, to say the least, environment in which we're trying to run a humanitarian operation.
You are talking about lawlessness in Gaza because of the war, but we are talking here about the Israeli side. These settlers live in the Israeli side.
Well, we've also seen attacks on the Israeli side, which our humanitarian colleagues have firmly condemned, and which we do as well. Okay. Yes. Sorry.
Thanks, Steph. To follow up on Benno's question, has the Secretary General spoken to any of the political leadership in France to congratulate or commiserate?
No, I mean, short answer is no. He does not traditionally reach out to political leaders after parliamentary elections. Letters will be sent to the new Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, as well as to the new President in Iran.
A quick follow-up on Ukraine. I think there's talk of a Security Council meeting tomorrow. What are the Secretary General's expectations for a Security Council meeting on Ukraine chaired by Russia?
Well, I think the presidency, the presidency will preside over the meeting. The Secretary General's representative, no doubt, we will have somebody brief, no doubt, along the same lines that we expressed ourselves in the statement I issued earlier. And it is not the first time that the Russian Federation has presided over the Security Council meetings on Ukraine. Gabriel.
Thanks, Steph. You mentioned earlier in the briefing that you've asked for information from the Israelis on the alleged misuse of UN facilities, particularly UNRWA facilities. Have you received any information?
Not that I'm aware, and I don't think UNRWA has.
And you ask?
Yeah, UNRWA has been in the lead on this, and I don't believe they've received any information.
Thank you. And again, we're seeing thousands of Palestinians in Gaza City being asked to quote unquote evacuate. Number one is where do they evacuate to, but more importantly is what aid is the UN providing in the last several days to these thousands of people?
We're trying to follow the movement of people where they are, right, in supplying in terms of food kitchens and other help. Where they're going are places that are, I don't want to say safe or safer, perhaps less dangerous. So it's this constant movement of people that we've been talking about for quite a long time now.
Is there anything the Secretary General can do to try to stop this? Because it continues.
Well, I mean, our stop has been continuing to deliver the same message publicly and privately for a call for a humanitarian ceasefire, the release of the hostages, and full humanitarian access. You, please.
Thank you, Steph. My question is not France, but also the Iranian presidential elections. Does Secretary General have any comment about the Iranian presidential election?
We look forward to working with the new Iranian president. Nizar, Deji, then Abdelhamid.
Yesterday, last week, I asked about use of white phosphorus in South Lebanon. Again, this weekend, there was another use against a town in South Lebanon. Have you heard about it? And do you have any position on that?
Share with you at this point, but I will check again. As soon as I have something, I will share it with you. Deji, then Abdelhamid.
This is to stop the misinformation, just in case. Do you know in what currency Russia paid the contribution? In US dollars? Or?
Yeah, the assessments are made are always made in dollars, and we receive money in dollars.
So it's in dollars. Thank you.
Yeah, dollars are currency in the
Thank
bank.
you.
It's the currency I get paid to with my salary.
Thank you.
Abdelhamid.
Yeah. First, if you have a comment on the presidential elections in Mauritania, since we're talking about elections.
We look forward to working with the president of Mauritania in his new term.
But my real second question. A group of independent journalists, including from CNN and Associated Press, entered Rafah for the first time. They were evicted a few minutes later because of, but their assessment that Rafah has been turned into a heap of rubble and sand. Do you share that assessment? And if that's the case, do you still hesitant to call that a war crime or a genocide?
Two points. On the issue of journalists, we have repeatedly called for journalists to have free and unfettered access to Gaza, right, and to be kept safe while doing so. It's critical. We're well aware of the state of Rafah. We're there, right? Our colleagues have been there throughout, but it is important for the world to see through independent journalists what is actually going on, what aid is being distributed, what aid is not being distributed, you know, just to get a fuller picture. On the issue of genocide, I mean, you know very well that's not for us, for the Secretary General to make that designation. On that note, it's over. You may go home. Oh, and then we have Bintu Keita will brief.